Well, I like to resonate also with what Warren was sharing about, you know, uplifting the character of humankind basically means how to be a better human being, and building a pure land on earth is to help this world realize a better future. Resonating with what he's sharing is also what you think about, what do we leave behind for our children? We think that we buy and buy, and we buy and buy, and we leave these objects to our children, and we think that that is our legacy. And these heirlooms gets given to our children, and our children to our children's children, and so on and so forth. And we think that's it. But actually, in reality, the legacy that we leave behind is this planet and the kind of people living in this planet. That is the real legacy that we're leaving behind. So think about it. What do we want to leave behind? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor this morning to share with you my experiences of what Buddhism means to me. You hold in your hands a beautiful invitation to remember that it is possible to live your life with the wise and tender heart of a Buddha. So let me ask you a question. When you hear the word Buddha, what do you think? Anyone? When you hear the word Buddha, what comes to mind?
Peace.
Peace, good.
Wisdom.
Wisdom, okay. Enlightened.
Compassion.
Compassion. Someone said something else before compassion? Love and compassion. Good. What else do you think when you hear the word Buddha? What comes to mind?
Smile.
Smile. Great. Anyone else? One more?
Kindness.
Kindness, okay. So all these things that you've listed, the values of what you see in the Buddha, they're all right. But actually, the word Buddha simply means awake or awakened. It does not refer to a particular historical person or to a philosophy or to a religion. It actually refers to your own mind that is not asleep but fully awake. It is beyond your imagination. It is brilliantly clear, and it's open, and it's spacious, and it's full of excellent qualities like unconditional love, as just someone said, compassion and wisdom, and all those things that you have listed, those qualities that you have listed. So these things, also, it sees things as they truly are. Not what you perceive, but it's what it truly are. So the mind is never dull, and it's never confused. It is never distressed by doubting, by fears and emotions that so often torture us. So true mind is a mind of joy that is free from all suffering, and that is who you really are. That is who you really are. But this does not mean that your mind just sits there, being perfect and doing nothing. It's actually at play all the time, and it's creating your world. So if this is true, is what I've just said, then why isn't your life and the whole world perfect? If these are all the qualities that we have, and if these are really what we are, so why aren't you happy all the time? So how could you be laughing 1 minute and then in despair the next? So why would awakened people argue, fight, lie, cheat, steal, and go to war? The reason is that even though the awakened state is the true nature of the mind, most of us don't see it. Why? Something is in the way. Something is blocking our view of it. Sometimes we see bits of it here and there, but the moment we see it, something else pops into our mind. What time is it? Is it time for lunch yet? Oh look, a butterfly. oh look, there's a camera. And once all these thoughts come in, our insight is gone. So it's like catching a feather on a fan. How do you do that? A slight movement, when you don't pay attention, your hand moves and the feather flutters away. So that's how delicate it is and how quickly we can lose it. So ironically, what blocks your view of your mind's true nature, your Buddha mind, is also your own mind. The part of your mind that is always busy, constantly involved in a steady stream of thoughts, emotions, and concepts. This busy mind is who you think you are. It's easier to see, like the face of the person in front of me. For example, the thought that you're thinking right now is actually more obvious to you than your awareness of that thought. So when you're angry, you pay more attention to what you're angry about than to the actual source of your anger, or where your anger is coming from. So in other words, you notice what your mind is doing, but you don't see the mind itself. You identify yourself with the contents of this busy mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your ideas, and end up thinking that all of this stuff is me and how I am. So when you do that, it's like being asleep, dreaming, and believing that your dream images are true. So if, for example, in your dream, you dream that you're being chased by a menacing stranger, it's very scary and real. Think about when you have nightmares. It's scary and it feels so real to you. But however, as soon as you wake up, both the stranger and your feelings of terror are gone. And you feel great relief. So furthermore, if you know you're dreaming in the first place, you won't have experienced any fear, right? It's just like sometimes when you're watching horror movies. I love horror movies. I don't know why, but I just simply love horror movies. I read Stephen King all the time. But as I'm reading it, and I'm so involved in it, I go through exactly the same thing as what the protagonist in the story is going through. But the fear that I experience is different because I know that I'm reading a story, that it's not real. So in a similar way, in our ordinary life, we're like dreamers. We believe that the dream we're having is real. So we think we're awake, but actually we're not. We think that this busy mind of thoughts and emotions is who we truly are. But when we actually wake up, our misunderstanding about who we are and the suffering that confusion brings is gone. So the Buddhist spiritual path is actually described as a road to freedom. But we need to ask this question, freedom from what? What does this freedom look like? What does it look like? Sometimes we think that freedom simply means being free of any outside control. We can do whatever we like, when we like. Or maybe we think that it means free expression of our feelings. But these kinds of freedom are only partial. If they're not accompanied by intelligence and basic good sense, we could end up acting impulsively, letting our emotions off the leash. We've seen that. We might be free to shout at people, or we can stay out all night indulging our appetite for excitement and sensations, but we're certainly not in charge, and we certainly are not free. We may feel temporarily energized and liberated by that kind of freedom, but this feeling is short-lived, and it's usually followed by more pain and more confusion as you try to attach to that sensation. So, some of us might think that freedom means having a choice. We're free to choose what to do with our life, what to do with our time, what to do with our money. We may choose wisely or we may choose foolishly, but it's our choice. So this so-called freedom is just a facade. Because when we make the same choices every day, do the same thing over and over again, and react in the same ways, our actions are equally predictable. And you see this pattern actually happening over and over again. When we look beneath the surface and see what is really going on, why we are unhappy, we actually can see the same storyline repeating again and again and again. Some of you might feel that this could be true. It sounds familiar for some of you. So let me raise an example. If we fight with our boss at work, we will probably fight at home with our partner or with our kids or our siblings. So we struggle here and there in our life with the same unconscious patterns of aggression, desire, jealousy, or denial until we're caught in a web of our own making. Let me share with you a real-life example here. This is my own experience. 5 years ago, I started on a roller coaster spiritual journey, and it had lots of highs and had lots of lows, but it was never high for long and it was never low for long. Actually, probably it was lower for a longer time than high. So I went off into the mountains at upstate New York. We have a retreat center up there. And I participated in a series of retreats over those years. These retreats rocked my worldviews. I spent a lot of time talking about my life. At one point, I realized that I don't know how to be my own best friend. A huge wave of sadness came over me. I broke down sobbing. I was the furthest thing from my own best friend. I was continually harassed by an inner judge who was merciless, who was relentless, nitpicking, driving, often invisible, but always on the job. I knew I would never treat the friend the way I treated myself, without mercy or kindness. My guiding assumption was, something is fundamentally wrong with me. I struggled to control and fix what felt like a basically flawed self. I drove myself in academics, was a fervent worker, and devoted myself to a very full social life. I avoided pain, and I actually created more, with an addiction to work and a preoccupation to achievement. Internally, I was anxious, driven, but I'm often depressed. I didn't feel peace with any part of my life. So I spent a lot of time in the woods, sitting in silence. And I began to realize that beneath all my mood swings, depression, loneliness, and addictive behavior, lurked that feeling of deep personal deficiency. I was getting my first clear glimpse into the core of suffering that I would revisit again and again and again in my life. And I look forward to revisiting that in the future. So while I feel exposed and raw, but I intuitively knew that by facing this pain, I was entering a path of healing. So throughout the years, these longings drew me more deeply into the Buddhist path. I found there the teachings and practices that enabled me to directly face my feelings of unworthiness and my insecurities. They gave me a way of seeing clearly what I was experiencing and showed me how to relate to my life with compassion. So the teachings of the Buddha also helped undo my painful and mistaken notion that I was alone in my suffering, that it was a personal problem, somehow my fault. So for many of us, feelings of deficiency are right around the corner. It doesn't take much. Just hearing someone else's accomplishments, or being criticized, or getting into an argument, making a mistake at work to make us feel that we're not okay. Just the tiniest little thing will trigger us into thinking something is wrong with me.